was a cold winter night when Detective John arrived at the mansion on the hill. The mansion belonged to Mr. and Mrs. Smith, a wealthy couple in their 60s. The couple was found dead in their bedroom earlier that day, and John was assigned to solve the case. As he entered the mansion, John noticed that the door was open, and there were no signs of forced entry. He walked into the living room and found it in disarray, as if someone had ransacked the place. However, nothing seemed to be missing. John then went to the couple's bedroom and found them lying on their bed, with their throats slit. John knew that he had to work fast to solve the case. He started questioning the staff and the neighbors, but nobody seemed to have seen or heard anything unusual. However, one of the staff members, a young maid named Maria, seemed nervous and avoided eye contact with John. John decided to focus on Maria and asked her to come to the police station for questioning. At the station, Maria finally broke down and confessed to killing the couple. She said that she was in love with Mr. Smith and was jealous of his wife. She had planned to kill the wife and frame someone else for the murder, but when she saw that Mr. Smith was also in the bedroom, she couldn't resist killing him too. However, John wasn't convinced that Maria was the killer. He continued to investigate and found a piece of evidence that led him to the real killer, Mr. Smith's business partner, Mr. Jones. Jones had recently found out that Mr. Smith was going to fire him and cut off all ties with him. In a fit of rage, Jones killed the couple to get revenge on Mr. Smith. With the real killer caught, John was able to solve the case and bring justice to the couple. However, he couldn't help but wonder how many other cases had been solved based on false confessions, and how many innocent people were sitting in jail. John decided to look deeper into the case and found out that Maria had been coerced into confessing to the crime. He found out that the real killer, Mr. Jones, had threatened Maria's family if she didn't confess to the crime. John was outraged by this and immediately arrested Mr. Jones. During the interrogation, Jones confessed to threatening Maria's family and framing her for the crime. He said that he had been jealous of Mr. Smith's success and wanted to take over the business. John was glad that he was able to solve the case and bring justice to the couple and Maria. He knew that he had to do something about false confessions, so he started a campaign to raise awareness about this issue. He also worked with the legal system to ensure that proper procedures were followed during interrogations to prevent false confessions. The case of Mr. and Mrs. Smith had a profound impact on John. He realized that there was more to being a detective than just solving cases. He had to fight for justice and ensure that innocent people were not punished for crimes they did not commit. John continued to work hard to solve other cases, but he always remembered the case of Mr. and Mrs. Smith and Maria. He knew that justice was not always easy to achieve, but he was determined to do his best to bring it to every case he worked on. John's campaign to raise awareness about false confessions gained momentum and he soon became a leading voice on the issue. He was invited to speak at conferences and seminars, where he shared his experiences and knowledge with other law enforcement professionals. Through his efforts, John was able to bring about changes in the legal system that helped prevent false confessions. He worked with lawyers and judges to ensure that interrogation techniques were ethical and that the rights of suspects were protected. John's work did not go unnoticed, and he soon became a respected figure in the law enforcement community. He received several awards and accolades for his efforts, including the prestigious Medal of Honor. However, John never forgot the case of Mr. and Mrs. Smith and Maria. He often visited Maria in prison and worked with lawyers to get her sentence reduced. He knew that Maria was not a killer and that she had been a victim of a broken system. After years of hard work, John was finally able to get Maria released from prison. He worked with her to help her start a new life and even found her a job as a legal assistant. John retired from the force a few years later, but his legacy lived on. His campaign had led to significant changes in the legal system, and false confessions became a thing of the past. John's work had made a difference, and he knew that he had accomplished something truly significant. As he sat in his rocking chair on his front porch, John reflected on his life and the many cases he had worked on. He smiled as he remembered the case of Mr. and Mrs. Smith and Maria. He knew that he had made a real difference in their lives, and that was all that mattered. As John sat on his front porch, he received a phone call from an unknown number. He hesitated for a moment before answering it. "Hello, John speaking," he said. "John, it's Maria," the voice on the other end said. "I just wanted to thank you for everything you've done for me. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you." John was surprised to hear from Maria, but he was glad that she was doing well. He asked her how she was doing and how her job was going. "It's going great," Maria replied. "I love working in the legal field, and I'm grateful for the second chance you gave me. I just wanted to let you know that I'll never forget what you did for me." John smiled as he listened to Maria's words. He was glad that he was able to make a difference in her life, and he felt proud of the work he had done. As John hung up the phone, he looked out at the beautiful sunset and felt a sense of peace wash over him. He knew that he had accomplished something truly significant in his life, and that was all that mattered. John continued to enjoy his retirement, but he never forgot the lessons he learned during his years as a detective. He knew that justice was not always easy to achieve, but it was always worth fighting for. And he was grateful for the opportunity to make a difference in the lives of those he had helped along the way. A few months after his conversation with Maria, John received a surprise visit from an old friend, Detective Jim Richards. Jim was also retired, but he had heard about John's work on false confessions and wanted to catch up with him. As they sat on John's front porch, Jim shared a story with him that he had never told anyone before. It was about a case he had worked on many years ago, where a young man had been falsely accused and convicted of a crime he didn't commit. Jim had always felt guilty about the case, but he didn't know how to make things right. After listening to John talk about his work on false confessions, Jim realized that he had to do something. With John's help, Jim was able to track down the young man and work with a lawyer to get his conviction overturned. The young man was released from prison and compensated for the time he had lost. Jim was overjoyed that he was finally able to make things right, and he was grateful to John for inspiring him to take action. He knew that he had done something meaningful with his life, and he felt at peace. As John and Jim sat on the porch, watching the sunset, they talked about their lives and their work. They knew that they had both made a difference in the world, and they were proud of the work they had done. As the sun dipped below the horizon, John and Jim raised their glasses in a toast to the future. They knew that they had more work to do, but they were ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. And as they sat there, watching the stars twinkle in the sky, they knew that they had accomplished something truly significant in their lives, and that was all that mattered. In the following days, John and Jim decided to team up and continue working together to help people who had been wrongfully accused or convicted of crimes. They knew that there were still many cases out there where justice had not been served, and they were determined to make a difference. With their combined experience and knowledge, John and Jim were able to bring attention to cases that had been ignored or overlooked by the legal system. They worked tirelessly to find evidence and build cases to overturn wrongful convictions. Their efforts paid off, and they were able to get several convictions overturned and set innocent people free. They received recognition for their work and were invited to speak at conferences and seminars, where they shared their experiences and knowledge with other legal professionals. John and Jim knew that they had found their calling in life, and they were proud of the work they were doing. They were making a real difference in the lives of people who had been wrongfully accused or convicted, and they knew that their work was changing the legal system for the better. As they worked on each case, they never forgot the lessons they had learned during their years as detectives. They knew that justice was not always easy to achieve, but it was always worth fighting for. And as they sat on John's front porch once again, watching the sunset, they knew that they had accomplished something truly significant in their lives. They had made a difference, and that was all that mattered. As John and Jim sat on the porch, a sense of contentment washed over them. They had both accomplished a great deal in their careers, and they knew that they had made a difference in the lives of many people. But they also knew that there was still work to be done. The legal system was far from perfect, and there were still injustices that needed to be addressed. John and Jim decided to team up and continue their work on false confessions and wrongful convictions. They knew that they had a lot to offer, and they were determined to make a difference. Over the next few years, John and Jim traveled across the country, speaking at conferences and seminars, and meeting with lawyers, judges, and law enforcement officials. They shared their experiences and knowledge, and they worked tirelessly to bring about change. Their efforts were not in vain. More and more people began to realize the importance of preventing false confessions and wrongful convictions. And the changes that John and Jim had helped bring about began to have a real impact. As they approached their twilight years, John and Jim looked back on their careers with a sense of pride. They had accomplished a great deal, and they knew that their work would continue to have an impact for many years to come. And as they sat on John's front porch, watching the sunset once again, they knew that they had accomplished something truly significant in their lives. They had made a difference, and that was all that mattered.